what I'd like to do first, go back to the next slide, is just go through some of the demographics about the industry itself. There are about 76,000 workers employed in this industry, and that's in both the plastics products production sector as well as the synthetic resin. That's all together. There are 57,000 employed strictly in the production of parts and various household gadgets and bottles, etc. 37% of the workforce are women. And it's probably, this is one sector in the manufacturing sector that has the highest concentration of women, actually, outside of the service sector where we have a higher proportion. 48% of the plants, not the workforce, are located in Ontario. 18% of that, you might want to keep that light lower so that you
This
see.
is trying to film, and you can't film with the light.
Oh, okay, okay.
I mean, unless people have a hard time seeing that.
Are you okay with it? Okay, 18% in the oil parts sector.
Sorry.
And the other important thing to bear in mind is that 75% of the plants we're talking about, of plastics products production, are small plants. They're under 20 workers. The picture that you see there is, just an indication of. You can't really see it very well myself. But that's a small plant of just a little bit above 20 workers where I taught a certification course because an inspector came in and practically condemned the place and ordered them to train the workers. But anyway, very precarious workforce that you have. They're usually not technologically advanced. Actually, the plant that precision would be look like a dream world compared to that plant. I was teaching in the front office there, and I got sick after being there for a week. I mean, my respiratory system was shot. So during the processing, I mean, these workers are exposed to a large number of toxic chemicals. And many of these, have been identified as memory carcinogens, endocrine disruptors, or just old plain carcinogens, and as well also toxic to the neurological system, the neurotoxins, respiratory irritants, you name it. The symptoms that people are experiencing really are from the effects of those particular chemicals. We're going to be focusing more on the cancer question, but those are equally important issues, health and safety issues, as well as the ergonomic issues. Okay? So what we're going to try to cover is what are workers exposed to in plastics productions? How are they exposed? What factors actually affect exposure? To what extent are workers exposed? And this is an important question because you usually have an inspector comes in, sniffs around with his meters, reads it, and says, oh, it's below the OEL, sorry, 5. And so let's take a look at what those things are in a different context. Okay? And let's then talk about the exposure standards and how we assess worker exposure. Next week. First, I just briefly talk about the plastic production process, and Gina has already done that. Essentially what plastics are synthetic polymers, and the building blocks are these monomer chemicals that are produced usually in the petrochemical industry, and then sent over to a resin manufacturer that polymerizes those substances. And the kind of substances we're talking about, things like vinyl chloride. Notice I have to say polyvinyl chloride, but vinyl chloride, that's the monomer. Styrene, that's the monomer. Okay? Propylene, that's the monomer. Okay? So we're talking about those are the simple molecules that are then cross-linked together to make these long molecules that become your plastic resin. Okay. During that process, when they're going through that polymerization process, what also happens is that that various additives, such as plasticizers, fire retardants, antioxidants, antifungals, colorants, and many other lubricants are added to that mix and blended. It's a process called compounding, which probably doesn't go on in some plants. In most plants that are producing products, there'll be a specialized compounding factory that will do that kind of compounding. Then the resins will also be mixed with other resins, copolymers, and other additives may be added, particularly as they get to the plastics product factory itself. These are then sent off to the factory where they undergo further processing and you get your final product, your auto part, toilet seats, cups, etc. The finished product. Let's go to the next slide. So what are workers exposed to when working on these products? Now bear in mind that these monomers never get completely polymerized, and not only that, the additives are not really part of the chemical structure itself. So when you put those through the injection molding machine or extrusion, that's going to be reheated, and all of a sudden, those additives that were in there, they become unbound. Okay, so do the monomers, and they're vented. There are vents on that machine that actually off-gas, and the off-gassing is important. They have to vent it, otherwise you'd have big bubbles in your plastics. Okay, so it is vented out. Okay, so you will get, during that process, you'll get residual monomers such as vinyl chloride, acrylonitrile, styrene, bisphenol A, etc., etc. Whatever monomer was in that ingredient will be given off. Okay, during that process. As well, the additives will also be given off. The phthalates, which phthalates are plasticizers. That's what makes the plastic nice and pliable. Okay, then there are fire retardants, many of which are actually legislated ingredients into the various mixes, and plus pigments. And bear in mind, all of these are not benign products. These are carcinogenic. They also, as Mark and Jim have gone through this, many are endocrine disrupting chemicals. Anyway, so the additives will be given off, and this is just a very incomplete list, by the way. You will have probably 10 or more that can be given off. Then on top of that, you will get combustion products. And those are pretty numerous too. That would be that. This next chart just gives you an idea. I'm not going to go through this. You'll never commit it to memory. Good thing you took a break, otherwise you'd be crossing the lakes and one is dying on this. But anyway, as you can see, each of the various polymers that are being processed in the molding operations can give off, do give off, various byproducts. And these are all very serious chemicals to be exposed to. Okay, next slide. So what do we know about these chemicals? Okay, most plastic products are endocrine disruptors, are estrogenically active. There was a study I just came across, published in Environmental Health Perspectives in 2010, that assayed well over 500 chemicals, and over 90% of those chemicals are estrogenically active. Even those without PDA, which everybody's making a big fuss about. Okay? So, and what happens too is, even if it wasn't estrogenically active to begin with, once you stress it, heat it, put it in the microwave, or run it through the injection molding machine, get them active, many of them become estrogenically active. As well, many of these substances are mammary carcinogens, and I think 215 have been identified as mammary carcinogens in animals. The other thing too is that many of these substances are neurotoxins, skin and respiratory irritants and sensitizers. Many are toxic, and this is without causing cancer. They're toxic to the liver and to the kidneys. So these are also the important thing to bear in mind with respect to talking about exposures is that you heard one of the good doctors say that you can't really find a threshold when you're talking about carcinogen. And there are no thresholds, really, you know. These are fictions, you know. These are things that basically industry has been able to get its sympathetic government to promulgate. But the other thing is when you're talking about endocrine disruptors, you're talking about very, very infinitesimal doses. Let me give you an idea what I'm talking about. I'm talking about an infinitesimal dose. Okay? If you take one drop of water, okay, because you're not talking about parts per million. You're not talking about parts per billion. You're talking about parts per trillion. And when you're talking about that, you take that one drop of water, and you get about 660 tank cars filled with some substance. Okay, let's call it acrylonitrile. Let's just call it water, okay, or air, whatever it is. Okay, and that's the proportion. So you're talking about, 660 tank cars going some 6 miles long on a railroad track to one, drop of the substance. That's what can trigger a hormonal reaction in your endocrine system, and cause all sorts of havoc, which Michael is going to talk about later. Okay, so as Gina was pointing out, I'm not going to spend a lot of time, because I think, is that it? Okay, we've got to move ahead. Okay, there are all sorts of areas in the production process where you can be exposed, from the receiving all the way down to packaging. There's a chart in our publication that indicates what factors actually affect exposure in the plastics production process. But I want to move to something else. I was going to have all sorts of other things to show you, but they won't permit it. Anyway, I know. Let's go to slide 16. Okay, I want to put these exposures in context. Okay, the values to the right are workplace exposure. This is coming out of the various hygiene literature. And these are not air concentrations, these are urine concentrations, okay, of the various, whether it's, bisphenol A, phthalate, DEHP, retardants, PB. These are unpronounceable, by the way. Styrene and acrylonitrile. So to your left are the concentrations found in workers' urine, okay? And these are post-shift concentrations. These are not the peak concentrations, by the way. These are pretty much the average concentrations that were obtained. Okay. Next to that, okay, are what would be considered what you would find in a normal general population or a reference group. Okay. So as you can see, what the levels that you're talking about in a worker, okay, I'm talking about what gets in there and starts doing its work, okay, compared to what the general population gets is just many times, magnitudes higher than what the general population is exposed to. But the general population is at risk itself, and based on a number of large-scale studies, and I'm talking about several hundred studies. Let me give you an example of BPA food. That what they concluded on the basis of several hundred studies is that BPA concentrations found in the human body is associated with organizational changes in the prostate, breast, testes, mammary gland, body size, brain structure and chemistry, and behavior of lab animals. Okay, that's at levels found in the general population, which are several orders of magnitude less than you find going in plastics workers. The other thing I just wanted to, how was our time? Just one more point. The other thing that is not taking into account in all this is the fact that workers are not exposed to these chemicals one by one. Today I'll take a dose of acrylonitrile. The next day I'll get a little BPA. Well, it doesn't happen that way. I mean, if we took a picture, we were able to take a picture of Gina's plant or any plant, you would see probably hundreds of compounds floating in the air that people are sucking in. Okay, and that's so it's all these decomposition products that are under normal processing operations, combustion products when you've got purging going on and overheating, and other contaminants from, let's say, the decorating, where they're using solvents to, clean the product, prep it, use paints, various acrylic paints and epoxy paints. Okay, so you have a whole smorgasbord of chemicals to sup on. Okay, so there's your toxic soup. And I think the other thing I just wanted to mention, we talked about, okay, the synergistic effects, okay? And of course, workers constantly ask, what are the synergistic effects? I'm getting all of this stuff at the same time, so what could be happening? And legitimately ask that kind of a question. Well, the Endocrine Society has in its latest scientific statement, concluded that, EDCs, endocrine disrupting chemicals, may be additive or synergistic in terms of the way they interact with themselves and with other hormones in the body. Okay. The other problem is that the other area that gives some credence to this, there have been a number of studies done, there aren't a lot of them, where they've taken into account the fact that people are exposed to complex mixtures. For example, I know I'm really going to butcher this guy's name, but I guess it's Ibarluzzi. Did I say it right? Jesus Ibarluzzi and his colleagues did a study where they did take account. And what they did basically is create an index of complex mixtures of EDCs, and in tissue, in breast tissue, okay, of women. This is an actual case-controlled study. And what they did was create this index, and they called it, as the total effective xenoestrogen burden. Okay, where they've been able. So what they did was they looked at what was happening to cases and controls, and they looked at their indices of exposure was basically this total effective, as well as what they may have been exposed to on a one-to-one basis. Now, when they looked at the effects on a one-to-one basis, chemical by chemical, they looked at limonene, or they looked at this. These were basically, this is a pesticide study, by the way. When they looked at that on a one-by-one basis, the results were very inconsistent. Worked here, no association there. Okay. When they used the index that they created in tissue, they looked at the load in tissue itself, then they were very powerful. I mean, they were looking at fivefold increase in risk of breast cancer of women exposed, to that total effective dose. Okay, my time's up, and what I say is that I would say to you that plastic workers are chronically exposed to EDCs. That's important that you realize that this chronic exposure. They're not getting a dose this day and so it's happening on a daily basis. They're exposed to EDCs, marine and other carcinogens, and complex mixtures. In my view, exposure profiles demonstrate a significant exposure, and indeed, plastic workers may be at considerable risk of breast cancer. Thank you very much.